We actually barely have it right now.
Because we have one online.
Five.
Okay.
Here.
My brain's going, wow, this is really.
But we don't actually technically need quorum tonight because nothing's being voted on.
Oh, okay, that's true.
But Sam missing is unacceptable.
All right.
Okay.
Doom, doom. I'm Kyle Waterman. Welcome to August 10th, 2026 Council Work Session. Could I please have a roll call, please?
Counselor Dowd,
Here.
Counselor Fisher,
Here.
Counselor Leftridge,
Here.
Counselor Blank, Counselor Nunnally, Counselor Walker,
Here.
Counselor Gabrielle,
Here.
and Council President Waterman.
Here. Today is our work session, and we have a couple of items on for discussion. The first discussion will be the naming policy for city-owned parks, facilities, and public assets. Could I have staff give a presentation?
Yes, Mayor and Council. Naming policy, so two items on the agenda, as you had mentioned. The first one being the naming policy for city-owned parks, facilities, and public assets. Do have a very brief presentation here, but as you recall, last fall I had a work session regarding this particular item. Obviously had a busy fall and spring, just trying to get this back before the council to see if we're headed in the right direction. And with that, I'll turn it over to Donnie for a brief staff report and then some discussion.
Good evening, Council. Donnie McBath, Planner 2. Tonight, we are bringing forward the proposed Parks, Facilities, and Public Asset Naming Policy. This is a work session for discussion and direction only, so no formal action is being requested tonight. Just briefly on the history. This came about after a request earlier in 2025 to rename the Kids Sports Facility in recognition of Dan Johns. That request highlighted that the city did not have a formal policy or consistent process for naming or renaming city-owned facilities. Council discussed the issue at the December 8th, 2025 work session and directed staff to look further into establishing a policy. Following that discussion, staff reviewed the policies from several other jurisdictions and found some common themes: prioritizing geographic and historical names, establishing criteria for recognizing individuals and organizations, providing public input, and keeping final authority with the City Council. I'll quickly walk through the policy. The policy applies to city-owned parks, trails, building, facilities, and public assets with the goal of creating a consistent process while reflecting Kalispell's identity, history, and geographic character. The naming criteria are prioritized into four categories: geographic features, historical and cultural significance, functional or descriptive names, and finally, individuals or organizations with significant and lasting contributions to community. The policy also sets a higher standard for renaming existing facilities, recognizing the importance of established names and community identity. For the process, requests would be reviewed by staff, followed by at least 15 days of public notice and a public hearing before council. Ultimately, council retains final authority and can approve, deny, modify, or refer a request for additional review. The policy also provides alternatives such as plaques, memorials, or commemorative features when formally naming a facility may not be appropriate. Again, no formal action is requested tonight. Staff is looking for council's feedback on the policy and direction on whether you'd like us to bring it to a formal consideration at a future meeting. With that, we'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions for staff regarding the policy? I'll jump in with a couple. Again, thank you for pulling it together. I mean, I think it's helpful because I look back at that meeting in December. It was before I was on council, and I can see this really would help navigate that situation. And then also, if there was ever a corporate sponsorship or something like that, I mean, it's sort of not really one of those things that's named in this identity. Like if there was a business that wanted to sponsor something, how does that fit into this policy?
I believe anybody can sponsor it, but there are stipulations to everything as donations and sponsorships.
So actually, if you look at under general standards, it is in here, and a commercial naming is prohibited unless otherwise approved by the council through a formal agreement. So that would be something council could consider. But in general, I think we were relying on kind of the geographical features, historical significance and all that. Certainly there may be opportunities for commercial naming, but that was something we did not head towards but
Again, that
something
was
council
my
could.
concern. I mean, that there is a process if we needed it, but it's not necessarily something that's preferred. So thank you for highlighting the space.
And then also under donations and scholarships or sponsorships, excuse me, kind of addresses when there's a donation that comes in and kind of to what extent that should be considered with that. So.
Right. Thank you for bringing that up, and I think it's a great policy in general, because I think it's very navigable, looking back to that December 8th conversation. Not having something didn't really give a clear way of what we're doing, so this, I think, hopefully would help us in the future. Mr. Fisher?
Thank you, Mr. Waterman. I was the one that requested this after that, and I totally supported the Dan Johns naming of kids' sports. And I like where this is headed. I had situations with county parks where people wanted to put in benches at Summers Beach and put their business logo on that bench, in the cement benches. Does that allow Chad to approve something like that, or that would come to city council too if they wanted to put a business name on a park bench engraved in it, or a placard in the middle of the bench?
Right. Well, the policy right now is set up for any of those type of naming, even if it's an alternative and not the facility itself, to come through city council.
So all those things would come through city council.
Right.
Would it behoove us to set a threshold amount? Like, for example, one time Sam Bibler bought, I think, 25 picnic tables, and he didn't want any naming rights on that, but we almost wanted to thank him and do something for that. All those types of things would require city council approval at this point right now,
Correct.
which is,
I will say, so there was a draft that did have plaques and things like that, smaller in nature, that would be done administratively through staff. Actually, we took it out, just knowing that we thought that it should all be council, but certainly it's something council could consider if it was, whether it's below a monetary threshold or just certain classifications of things like benches, plaques, et cetera. The council certainly could leave that up to being an administrative function if you felt like it was worthy.
I would be a fan of that. There's certain de minimis type things that just make sense, that serve the public good, a bench or a picnic table, that I don't think council needs to hear if administratively, city manager or parks director. I'd like to almost set a threshold, as long as it's nothing offensive or somebody's not trying to put some logo out there. Those are the things that if council or if staff or city manager or parks director has a problem with, it probably should come to council. But I'd like to set like a $500 threshold of somebody who wants to name a bench after a deceased loved one or something like that. That seems to make sense to me without it having to be delayed and come to council. That could take time. It would be nice for me to see a threshold of 500 or less that could be done administratively.
Yeah, I'd agree. Benches, rooms, small amenities, public bathrooms, commemorative features, those kind of things, I think can be done administratively. I don't know if it's a monetary threshold. I don't know how much the naming rights of a bench is, but I think, certainly things like parks, buildings, facilities, trails should go through council, but I don't know if we need to name every plaque and get approval for that.
But assets underneath that, I mean, I think we could list out those large items, but then say that smaller assets. I also think it could either be done administratively, or if we are gonna establish a parks committee, that could also be a space that is approved in. Sid?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a little bit of a counter view on that. If somebody is, especially if it's like, if they're gonna donate, let's say to put in a park bench or whatever, that's obviously gonna be more than $500, which is sad. But, I'd like those kind of things to come in front of council. They're kind of lighthearted. They give a little bit of shout out to people that are supporting the community. I think it's good. I don't see this happening a lot. Maybe it'll start happening now that we have a rule set up, but I don't know. The other thing is, and I brought this up when we were talking about renaming kids sports. It's very dangerous in the long run to name a lot of things after people, because sometimes you learn some interesting things about them, sometimes even years after they die, right? So I would like to have staff give that careful consideration when it comes in, just because it's dangerous, right? Yeah, there's a lot of things that have been named, placarded, and then torn down later on because you find out something about somebody, right? So anyway, just something to consider, but maybe I'm not seeing these now, but I would love to see, even if somebody wants to name a park bench after somebody, I would love to hear about it. So it makes, it's a community connection. And a lot of the things we do are not really that connected to the community in like a good, lighthearted way. Most of the time it's, 50% of the people hate us and 50% will like us, right? But nobody's opposed to, this kind of stuff. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Mr. Walker?
I tend to agree. I feel like we should at least wait and see if we're inundated with requests and it becomes an issue. If it does, we could certainly adjust and put an administrative action on some of the smaller items. But I'd like to see them come before us. I'd hate for something to slip through that we later find to be offensive because someone on staff didn't understand or didn't recognize what they were looking at the time. Just early days, make sure it goes okay, make sure it's doing what we want it to do, and then if we want to adjust, we always can. So I feel like we should leave it in there for now to go through council. But I like the rest of it.
You also have to kind of be up on current socials to understand some of this stuff. Like there was a bunch of signs being slapped up a few years ago that had big triangles on them. And I'm like, hey, I love geometry. Triangles are cool, right? But that's not what I meant, right? So a lot of things to be, I'm glad we're doing this process so that somebody gets to look at it before it gets thrown up here, right?
With that, we don't really have something that really is talking about assets in this policy. Everything's about the larger facility and parks, but are we getting down into park benches and
It does. The recognition alternatives up there says, if naming's not appropriate, for a facility as a whole, plaques, memorials, commemorative features, ceremonies, commemorative events, or whatever might seem appropriate is provided in there as an alternative.
with that? It seems like we have a fairly robust policy that has everything. It's just if we were ever to change that administrative, that we wanted to be staff, whether we wanted to have something, a section that we would cite that would be able to do that in the future without having to redo the whole policy. It would be a wonder if we wanted to. But in general, I think that this is a pretty robust naming platform and help navigate it. Seems like where we are, Mr. Fisher.
I actually changed my opinion with Mr. Walker and Mr. Dowd. And many people would want that attention for it to come to council if they're giving, and Mr. Dowd is right, you can't buy a picnic table for less than $1,000, $1,500 probably now, so maybe we should hear them all. And it could just be maybe this will start something new where more people want to give. I think of the bench that we just had to address, or the picnic table or bench that somebody wanted in. Maybe it would give them a desire to raise some money and get their name on that and come before council and be acknowledged for it. So I actually agree with you.
That's because Sid loves free stuff. What is Kalispell? So.
I know that about you.
I'm gonna write that down. Sid loves free stuff.
One question that I have in regards to the naming criteria. So we have kind of a hierarchy, right? So there's the geographic features, historical and cultural significance, functional and descriptive names, and then individuals and organizations. And those are mentioned priority. So theoretically, you would have to exhaust the geographic, historical, cultural, and descriptive names before we got to a particular name.
Yeah.
And that would be the case if there was significant contributions made by somebody in order to do a park. So, okay. So it seems like it would never have a park named after another person if you had to exhaust every other option.
Well, there's time and money, right? Dan put a lot of time and heart into the park, and that's one of the things that we're recognizing, not necessarily just fundraising and money. But yeah, I agree with you.
And I think it's intended to give more weight when you put it in the priority. I don't know if it's necessarily implying that you have to like eliminate any possibility of a geological feature, geographic feature, and then historical before you get to a name. But it's definitely intended to give priority to those type of names over in individuals.
Could we say something like the following factors should be considered with preference given to geographical, historical, cultural, and descriptive names? So it's not like an exhaustive naming criteria, but
Yeah.
instead just giving preference to.
Order of priority sounds very finite. Like if number one gets met, don't even go on to two.
That's how I read it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can clarify that for sure. But yeah, that was what was intended.
Sorry, after last week, I wasn't going to talk very much. Stop.
Just making sure, Ms. Gabriel, do you have any comments on this matter?
No, I mean, I see both sides of it, and I think if it's gonna come before us, maybe every quarter or something, once a month, if it can just come through with, here are the options. I'm not looking, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but do you all want us to be the ones that have to approve that? Or are we just going to be aware that it's happened?
No, the intent is that it would be approved by council, so it'd be vetted by staff and then moved on to council for approval.
It would be a resolution.
Got it.
Right.
Buy their way into changing something that has historical value or significance to the community. And that spells out in here. That is spelled out in here.
Yes, that was sort of my question about corporations as
Yep.
well. I didn't want to give a preference in that sense.
Seems that would fall into the naming.
Right.
And Mr. City Manager, do you believe you have enough guidance now? I mean, I think the document's great. I just don't like the word priority in that sentence. It just sounds like, when I look at a list of priorities, if number one's met, then I don't need to go to number two.
Yes, we've got enough guidance to get this on a future council agenda here in the coming weeks.
So I think that there we had a good conversation, but again, we really would like to see all these come back to council. Again, thank you for organizing this and putting this together, because I know that there's some research, but hopefully it becomes a problem that we have to maybe look at different changes. But as we get into the parks and recs, I think it's really good to make sure that we have this policy ahead of time before we get into future conversations without guidance.
I guess last question, is this an administrative policy or is this a policy that we're gonna approve with resolution?
Council will approve it by resolution.
Thanks.
All right. Well, we've concluded that conversation. Are there any public comments on the naming policy? And seeing none online, we'll move ahead and talk about the West Side Parking Management Zone update.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, as you may recall here, going through budget work sessions, there was a lot of discussion regarding parking, parking enforcement. At that time, there was a request to get an update on the West Side Parking Management Zone. And actually, also, you may recall, there was an action item by the council to add a block face within the parking management zone, which also there was, at that point in time, just a request to get a brief history and an update on it, because it's been quite some time since the council has got an update on the parking management zone. Within the memo, we did provide a couple of tables that outlined the number of permits sold to both residents as well as students, the revenue that the program's been generating since that time. I will say that In general, what was created is a residential parking district. This was quite a controversial and kind of long-standing planning kind of agenda item through the planning department and KPD and the council. It pretty much started in late 2012 with the school district and the neighborhood. Really what makes it interesting, and I guess like going back, residential parking districts are a common tool in neighborhoods around schools or campuses and that sort of thing. The school district and staff and really what ultimately became a neighborhood committee worked for quite some time coming up with this proposal here, which was adopted in 2015 by the council. Really, we're here to answer any questions, go over a bit of the history. Like I said, this was developed over multiple meetings between the school district, which has approximately 1,400 students in the area between Elrod and Flathead High School, which, like I said, with the historical context in the neighborhood, parking changes, you got a lot of students coming in. At the time, the school district with this proposal also did add a lot of parking to their inventory as part of this. Through restriping, they actually bought an entire block face and turned that into parking, reconfigured some area at Elrod into parking. So there was a lot of effort that went into this between the school district, the neighborhood, and the city. Like I said, it took quite some time, and happy to answer any questions as far as how the boundary was created. I will say as well, at that time, within the boundary that's shown there, there was a number of surveys, and the survey results at that time, really the residential neighborhood, 97% of that area wanted a solution and wanted a residential parking district created. And this is how it started. It was also designed in a way that it could grow as necessary. And there absolutely was concerns at that time as well, if it would just get pushed out. To date, that really hasn't happened. There's been 3 block faces added, but it hasn't really, we haven't seen a big push extending beyond that. And just anecdotally, don't get a lot of complaints, don't hear a lot. Typical complaints at the time were just trash, littering, noise, smoking, and that type of thing in the residential neighborhoods. So with that, got staff here, Karen and Ben with KPD, here to answer any questions. So.
Mr. Dowd, you have,
That's where you going? All right.
let's start with Mr. Dowd, because this was really something that you brought up as a.
Yeah, so how long have we not had proactive parking enforcement? About somewhere between 6 months and a year, right?
Since December.
Since September?
December of
December,
2025.
okay. And has there been like a pretty big uptick in complaints during that 6 months or so?
No, sir, not in that district.
Okay. I was just looking at the revenue it brings in with it, like the tickets we hand out, right? We're upside down on it. The enforcement costs more than we're bringing in on it, right? So one of my questions was, and I see that we have a management zone boundary. Does that mean that without us approving additional area, that we can't go outside of that? Is that correct?
So you've got a planning boundary, which is that red area.
Yeah.
And then, so the actual enforcement only happens in the areas that's checkered. So anything that would go beyond that would require, an ordinance amendment by the council to expand not only the boundary, but adding any block faces also requires the council approval as well.
And so the streets in there that are not any of the colors on here, they're still within, they're within the boundary. They're still subject to that same parking restriction. Is that correct? Right now?
They're not.
No? So only the shaded streets are. That's
Correct.
it. Is there another shading down by Legends Field?
No.
No? It's okay. So really, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 full blocks and then 1 street is what we're enforcing now. Is that what you're telling me?
Everything that's colored there is what's being enforced.
Okay. Yeah.
And the heart of the main issues originally were that blue area.
Sure.
That was where a majority of the concerns and complaints were coming from.
And I can understand that just from access to Flathead High, how that would work out. So, we didn't originally have you know, between 6th and 5th, the one we just added, didn't originally have that in there. And I'm wondering, did we add that because we had placed these other streets inside of the parking management system and then push the problem out to them? Is it going to continue to grow like that is kind of my question. And I know this is a hard thing to answer because it's been like years, right? It looks like the first one was 2015. Is that when we initially incorporated this? Okay, so between 2015 and today, so, what's that?
3 blocks.
Yeah, I see that. I'm just wondering what's going to look like in 25 years, what's going to look like in 30 years. And that,
There'll still be a lot of empty, uncolored blocks.
well, and that might be the case. I would be happy about that because this is a pain in the ass for our officers to enforce. It really is. This is not easy enforcement. We're asking them to do a lot of stuff when they could be out doing other things that we're probably more in favor of, right? I'd rather they were on patrol than looking at, who's parked in these specific areas. But that's just me. I don't actually live there. The high school was built in 1901, all right? There's nobody that lives anywhere near that high school that was unaware that there was a high school there. And my worry in the future, as if this continues to grow, and it's not growing at a fast rate now, but if we jump up in population another 15,000, you never know. I mean, it might just accelerate with the population. I'm just worried that we're going to continue to push the problem out into neighborhoods that don't currently have that issue because we placed the block adjacent to them inside of the district. So that's one thing. The other thing is, do we really need it at all at this point? Because we're not doing proactive enforcement. We're doing reactive enforcement now. And maybe our policy should be, instead of patrolling this area and checking on the parking, we just respond to complaints. Maybe it becomes a complaint-driven situation instead of a proactive monitoring situation. I just haven't seen a whole bunch of parking issues since we haven't been chalking tires, basically. So that's just something I wanted to bring up here. I don't have a whole bunch of things. I'm not going to rant on this for hours or anything. I just wanted to bring it to our attention that, hey, we may have quelled the problem with a cultural norm now, that people just know if they park there in front of somebody's house that they're going to get called up and get a ticket, right? I'm just wondering if we're at that point now, or if we really do need to proactively monitor these streets.
Do you want me to answer those or those comments?
Well, I mean, if anybody has
So
an
we were
opinion,
doing, you gotta remember the school year.
I want to hear from the police a little bit more than I want to hear from you right now,
Yeah.
but go ahead.
Well, the enforcement school year is,
Yeah, sure.
so it's only was half the year. So through December, so typically your enforcement starts, and obviously it does take a while for those changes to kind of catch on. We're about to go into a new school year, and we're ready, to start enforcement again. So the norm has been enforcement within the residential parking district. And as a student, you can park there, you just need a permit. We're not saying you can't park there either. So, and yeah, your concerns throughout were all brought up during that planning process, that it was gonna get pushed out. To date, it hasn't shown that. I would just say that in general, our complaints and all that have gone down drastically, and there seems to be, I'm not sure everybody there's 100% satisfied, although I do feel like it's a lot better than it used to be.
So my other consideration was, if this is as important to the people of that neighborhood who bought a house next to a high school, or continue to own one next to a high school, I guess, after cars were invented. I'm just wondering if it still is as big of an issue as it was when we went through the whole planning to start this up, and whether we can just go back to reactive enforcement.
think you would hear from that neighborhood if you did that. If that's a route council wanted to go, I think that you would want to probably hold a public hearing and do surveys and do all that. Certainly, we didn't do any additional surveys or anything coming into this work session. I know, there was, just a discussion about kind of getting a feeling for it. Certainly, we can, as staff, reach out if council wants and do a whole other survey, scenario throughout the district and see how it's working out and get some feedback. I would like to add something too, and maybe Ben can clarify. I don't think we're doing general patrols. It's our parking enforcement officer that would be within that district. So it's, police officers are not getting pulled off the street to go enforce.
It sounds like the maintenance we're doing is working, so let's stop doing the maintenance and everything should keep working. Like, I feel like if we stop doing the maintenance, it's gonna break down again. Like,
Well, it didn't break down in 6 months is my point.
well, but they had already been taught for 10 years plus half a semester that they were gonna get a ticket. And they may have learned in 6 months that, oh, maybe we can get away with it, and they'll start pushing again. But it's only been one semester.
I've also heard rumors that the school has purchased more parking lot. Recently, is that true or not?
I know they were looking at another site. I don't know if they purchased it or not. I can't comment on that.
Okay. Yeah, this is an interesting thing because this is really a problem generated by the school district, which is not part of the city, not part of the county, it's their own entity, but it's in the city of Kalispell, so it's our officers that have to go patrol it. And I just rather not have them do that. If things stay like they are now and we get very few complaints, we get a complaint, we go check it out and, assess a ticket if that's appropriate instead of doing the proactive monitoring. So I know I'm kind of beating that horse to death, so I'll stop there. That's really all I had to say about this. I do enjoy the history of it. How controversial at the time was this with Kalispell as a whole? I know the people in this area were in favor, but what about everybody else? What were their feelings? Do you have any idea?
I can't. The reality is, this was a pretty site-specific issue that neighborhood cared greatly about, and it was about as political, and you had council members get on because of it. So it was about as politically driven. There was solutions needed. Working with the school district, working with the neighborhood, working with KPD. So at the time, it was about as big of an issue for about 3 years as council has seen. Certainly in my time here, there wasn't anything that really would have risen above this particular.
Maybe similar to Friday cruising that we're having today?
It was the same.
Okay.
It was just as much as Cruise Kalispell, yes.
Well, I was going down a path here earlier talking about the funding part of this, but the other option here would be to create an SID for the enforcement, right?
You wouldn't want to do that. You could always raise the ticket price, the fine.
Would the ticket prices affect this, or is that wholly separate?
What's that?
No, the ticket prices we just did affect
Just do
this,
the ticket price for
right?
parking?
Right, but, what is the fine, Ben?
It's $10 on here.
Currently, it's still 10. I believe we haven't decided to change it yet.
So this is not included in the parking adjustments we just made?
I'd have to verify that, because that went up. I need to determine whether or not that it would apply to this one as well. But certainly if that's something that we could do that. That would raise additional revenue based off of the number of tickets we're issuing, but the fees you see before you would be based off of the $10.
Well, I've brought up, I'm that's Ward 2, right? I'm not in Ward 2.
This is Ward 3.
Is it Ward 3?
I would
Okay.
definitely, and I know for myself and Mr. Lethbridge, I see that you're also asking, but I definitely hear positive from people who are on 3rd Avenue West and 2nd Avenue West that they appreciate the permits that are there and that it is working for them. So they are not, part of it is, again, historically, and just where it is, all the parking lots that Flathead High owns are towards the west, and where the enforcement is, that large blue area, is out the front doors. And so
Yeah.
kids were going and parking on Third Avenue West and Second Avenue West because they were finding closer parking to the front door than they were in the back parking lots. This has sort of curbed that. One question I have, do students apply for the permits? Or are they just for residential?
They can purchase them from Karen or the school resource officer.
So they can,
Either way,
okay.
yes.
Mr. Lethbridge?
First, I just think it's a super innovative local control mechanism, right? I mean, if people want into it, then they have a mechanism to get into it, right? They petition 75% of the block, and obviously we don't see everybody clamoring to do it. There's not a need in the entirety of it. And if people don't want it anymore, they also have the ability to petition out of it. And we don't see anybody doing that just yet. My question for KPD is, we kind of have held steady around 600 to 500 violations a year. Can you provide any sort of demographics of are those repeat offenders? Are they mostly students? Are they visitors? Are we seeing a lot of just students choosing not to get permits and just getting tickets over and over again?
It's primarily students. I don't know if we have been tracking data on repeat offenders yet, but it's primarily students.
Have we engaged at all with the high school in terms of an educational campaign? Is it just students don't know about it, or they just don't care and don't mind paying the $10?
The school resource officer does education with the students every year regarding parking.
I saw the permits that the students bought dropped almost by 40% over the last year. Is there any rationale that you know of for that?
Not that I know of.
What's the cost of a staff or a student permit?
I believe they're $25 across the board.
For the school year.
For the school year.
So I have a little bit of a counter to one of those statements. It is, you called it a unique piece of local control, but as far as economically, the rest of Kalispell is subsidizing this neighborhood with extra enforcement. I mean, you could look at it from that lens as well. And these are all just food for thought. I'm not asking for anything to be done right now. I'm just throwing my concerns out there. And, I look at the same thing downtown. We haven't hardly had a parking issue downtown. We don't have any more complaints than we normally do. And we haven't been jogging tires and enforcing it, right? So maybe we don't need to.
I think people still think there's.
I know they still think that. I'm
think
just
the word's
waiting for
out yet.
I'm waiting for the hate mail tomorrow that I'm going to get about all of this, right? But yeah.
Nobody's enforcing.
Figure it out sooner or later.
Sure. Well, yeah, and that's one thing that, I never bank on people's bad behavior. I think of them as good people until we catch them as bad people. So, yeah, I understand that philosophy as well. I'm just saying, it's made a difference here at the city because we're not wasting as much manpower as we were before, right? Now we have an open position because of it, and there's money that's out there hanging in the wind. Maybe we just wait a little bit longer. I mean, just keep going as it is right now, right? Keep tracking the stats and see if it gets better, worse, or stays the same.
Did you have a comment?
I just wanted to note that we had our animal warden begin to patrol not only the school district area, but also all the lots downtown. She hasn't been chalking tires, and then as of July 1st, she was reclassified to a special service officer and has been focusing on parking as part of her code enforcement duties. But it's been primarily lots and the Flathead High School district, but there hasn't been any chalking of tires. But there has been a person assigned to proactive enforcement in the high school district specifically.
And the one thing that I hear actually more than anything else from downtown business owners is the rock and roll thing, right? And we're definitely not doing that right now, but that's something that they still want us to do. I just don't know how big of an issue it is. We don't hear, people aren't in here yelling at us right now about it, so it must not be terrible.
Though, I guess what I would say is right now, I mean, somebody's like on Second Avenue West or Third Avenue West they own a house there, and they see a car that doesn't have a permit hanging off of it, is that where we're getting the complaints generally?
Yes, sir, I believe that's the case, and either the school resource officer would be notified and would, come out and handle that, or we would notify the parking officer. But patrol isn't being called to the district.
Okay. To me, it's like, again, I can see and have just heard historically, that was just the challenges that students were parking out there, again, for their convenience. There were other parking lots available to them, and that was the neighborhood feeling that they didn't have any parking in front of their house. So that was it's nice that they're able to see if somebody's violating that, and they're able to self-report. So.
And one of the original complaints we had about this area is that people were blocking driveways all the time. That's illegal in and of itself and can be enforced all the time, everywhere in the city. So I don't actually see that as a condition to continue this type of program. This is more for just general parking.
And since this policy was enacted, we've also enacted some policies of derelict cars and cars that are blocking sidewalks and stuff like that. We have a couple more ordinances on the books, I believe. So.
Yeah, I voted against all those, but yes, I do remember them.
I'm just catching up. I think, again, the idea here was to make sure that we had an informational update on what this was. That was the request, is making sure that since there are so many new council members, there aren't council members who got elected because of this issue on the council. That was what we're doing. Ms. Gabriel, do you have any comments on this issue?
No, just that I second what the city manager said about it being quite a lively bunch of meetings when this topic came up. So I think it does matter, especially to the people that live there. So as long as we're taking care of the problem for them so they can park and go into their homes, I think we're going the right way.
Yep. And so I really appreciate the council picking this up, because this wasn't on the schedule. I asked for the work session. I just wanted to, learning the history of it was important to me, because on the 6 years I've been here, nobody's ever told me that. And I've just been through a couple of these expansions, and I'm like, it was alarming to me, because 3 of these happened during my terms. So I was like, hey, if this continues like this, how long before it's the entire west side, right? And I just keep thinking that, I don't want to spend our enforcement money in this area, not this area of town. I mean, in parking. I would rather spend it in the things that people really, that make more an impact to everybody's daily safety. But anyway, long story short, thanks for talking about this. I didn't have any specific agenda. I just wanted to speak about it a little bit and put some of my questions out there. I'm not thinking of this as the city. I'm thinking of this as a citizen. And this is what everybody else out here should be doing as well. So, keeping a close, watchful eye on your government.
With that, do we have any other discussion on this item? Then I will just open things up to public comment. Again, this will be opening things up to general public comment and public comment about this issue. If you would like to provide comments of any item that is under the jurisdiction of City Council, please approach the podium and state your name for the record. Please limit your comments to around 3 minutes. And if you are attending via Zoom, please raise your hand and we'll go from there. So opening up to public comment.
And I have a helpful little timer for anybody that's interested. I'll put it up here.
Good evening, Council. My name is John McDonald. I live in Kalispell. This is my 4th time at this podium on this issue, and I'm not going to repeat myself tonight. You've heard the case law, you've heard the correction on hostile takeover, you've heard the citation to state statute. Tonight, I want to tell you what's changed since the last time I stood here, and correct something I got wrong, and put new evidence in front of you that you have not heard yet. Here's what I got wrong. I cited Montana's ALPR statute before as a flat requirement that this data stays anonymous. I went back and read it closer. It isn't flat. The statute actually splits ALPR data into two categories: data collected for transportation planning, which does not require guaranteed anonymity, and data collected for regulated parking enforcement, which doesn't. What Kalispell is proposing falls in the second category, the one without anonymity guarantee. I'd rather correct my own claim in front of you than let it stand uncorrected. But I'd also ask you to sit with what that correction actually means. The legislature who wrote a stronger privacy standard for one category of this exact technology and didn't extend it to this one. Nothing stops this council from adopting that stronger standard voluntarily. That's not a technicality, that's a choice in front of you next week. Our freedoms are never taken all at once. They're taken one step at a time, and every step gets presented as reasonable. Freedom traded for safety, privacy traded for convenience, liberty traded for efficiency. This was never really about the cameras. It's all about who this city trusts to draw that line and who doesn't. So who does this actually touch? The nurse coming off a night shift, still in her scrubs, who parked 20 minutes extra because the ER ran late. The dad, in his socks, running out mid-dinner to feed the meter with no idea his truck just got logged into a government database. The grandparent, driving in early just to watch a kid's face light up outside Flathead High School. None of them did anything wrong. None of them get a vote tonight. But I am the closest thing that they get to a vote, and so is every one of you. Before any of us are here or against this proposal, we, all of us, on this side of the podium, we the people, you took an oath to that Constitution. We did not have to. The authority you exercise from that dais is yours. Is not yours. It's on loan from us. A steward doesn't own what's placed in his care. He preserves it, strengthens it, and hands it back intact. Tonight, next week, you're not just voting on a budget line, you're deciding what shape that loan comes back in. So here's my ask. Again, I want you to pause this funding until a named vendor, a written policy, and public retention terms exist before $1 moves. This isn't the vote, and that's why I'm asking for something concrete tonight instead of a nod toward the next agenda item. You have 1 full week. Read the public comment this council has received, all of it, not just mine, and actually weigh it before August 17th. 2 things that I haven't told you before. First, this council has been pointed to Bozeman as a city already doing this without incident. A Bozeman police captain is on the record saying that department has no plans to use this technology at all. If Bozeman isn't the precedent it's been described as, I'd ask where the actual precedent is. Second, the country that has run ALPR-based parking enforcement the longest and at the largest scale is the United Kingdom. Nearly 3.8 million tickets in a single quarter from private operators alone. That backlash got bad enough that the UK government had to step in and build a whole new oversight system just to contain the damage after the fact. That's the version of this that runs unchecked for years. And I'd rather Kalispell build the oversight first before that happens. And on liability, when a constitutional violation flows from an official city policy, the city is liable, not just the officer. Cities don't get qualified immunity, and cities that lose usually pay the other side legal fees too. There's bills that cities have already paid for because of these cameras. The question isn't whether it comes, it's when. 2 case names you haven't heard from before, both short. Quayle versus United States held that using technology to see more than a person could naturally observe counts as a search. State versus Bullock is why Montana doesn't have to follow the federal floor at all. Montana rejected it decades ago and built its own stronger standard. Combine those with the constitutional text itself, privacy shall not be infringed without the showing of a compelling state interest. We don't have to prove we deserve that privacy because we already have it. The government has to prove it needs to take it away. And here's the part that should trouble you most. Even when courts agree cameras like this raise the real constitutional questions, they do not agree on where the line sits. That disagreement is not a job for this council and the mayor of Kalispell, Montana. None of you were elected to decide where the 4th Amendment ends. If you fund this system next week and the city draws that line ahead of the courts still drawing it, that is the cart before the horse. At the very least, you could pause the funding until a law is actually settled. Before I ask these, I want to be clear about something. These are not rhetorical questions. I have asked versions of every question that follows before, verbally, at this podium, and in writing, submitted directly to the council and city staff. As of tonight, not one of them has been answered on the record, either verbally or in writing. I'm asking them again tonight, and I expect actual answers in writing or on the record before August 17th, not after the vote, not as a follow-up once this is already funded. Yes or no, on the record, that's all you need to do is say yes or no and state your name. Is the retention period in writing before the system goes live? A full public policy adopted before any contract or dollar is spent? A sunset clause so that a future council has to reauthorize this, not inherit it forever? One more, also not new. I have asked this before too and have not received an answer. What is enforcement near Flathead High School actually meant to accomplish? Will residents get ticketed in front of their own homes? If that's true, writing it into binding policy costs you nothing. None of what I've just asked this is important, and you guys haven't answered my questions. Are you guys going to answer my questions?
The public comment isn't necessarily for us to have a response to everything. I appreciate that you have done that.
So you guys don't want to answer my questions?
Again, that's not the format of
But
public comment.
it's your constitutional obligation to answer these questions. Everything that I said here tonight is a paper trail. If this program is challenged in court, expect a lawyer to point to a night like this as one proof that the city was warned and did it anyway. If Montana has one of the strongest privacy constitutions in this country, why do so many of us keep coming back to this podium to defend it ourselves? This isn't one resident with one opinion. It's a pattern. People across this community who don't know each other raising the same alarm independently. If the people in these seats won't defend our rights, I have a real, simple reason to run for a seat for whoever won't. So if you just answer my questions and, be coherent and dialogue with me back and forth, we could get some things done, but you guys don't want to do that.
Mr. McDonald, thank you very much for the comment, and I'll just sort of address a couple of items. One, I know that there's been invitations to meet with the mayor and city staff, and that's part of how we dialogue. And when we come as a council, we make decisions as a whole. So we're not able to really individually answer items for ourselves because what we do is work as a collective. So in the hearing is where we're able to make that deliberation. So the request for us to individually respond is not actually how the council is working. We work as a collective, and that is sort of, I believe, why most of us have not responded, because it's not right for us to respond individually. But sir, this is public comment. I am trying to have a little bit of dialogue because I'm over here in this seat today. And thank you for your comments. I know that you have also given Amy comments for us all to see. So going on, I'll see if there's any other public comment.
Hello again, Council. My name is Colton Vreeland, and as stated previously, I live near Flathead High School. I am not here as a part of any organization, and I am only here because I've read the packet John McDonald put together for each one of you. And because this proposal will put a camera system right in the area I live in, logging the plates of everyone who drives past the school, including me, my neighbors, and the families dropping kids off every morning, I'm not going to repeat everything he has already told you as I stated previously in my last comment here. I want to make one point and as plainly as I can, and one more that's specific to where I live. This council has heard tonight that a camera system's use policy doesn't exist yet, not in draft form and not in outline. The police chief said so himself in writing. The policy will, quote unquote, will have to be finalized once we select the vendor. That means the order of operations on the table tonight is fund it, then pick who builds it, and then write the rules for how it's used. I'd ask every one of you to sit with how backwards that is. Nobody here would sign a lease before reading it. Nobody here would buy a car before agreeing on the price, but that is essentially exactly the sequence being asked of this council on a system that will log the movements of every one of your constituents who drives through downtown Kalispell. I'm not asking you to kill this program. Nobody up here tonight is asking you to do that, and I want to make that very clear. The vote isn't tonight, it's a week from now, as you stated. On August 17th, What I am asking is smaller, and I think harder to say no to. Use the week that you have each been handed a packet with actual record in to read that has timelines, correspondence, case law, what has happened in other cities, legal and illegal. Read it. Verify the parts you doubt, and after reading it, if you still believe funding this before the policy exists is the right call, say so, and please put that in writing and tell us why. I think that that's a fair outcome for everybody who's concerned about this. What isn't fair is voting on August 17th having never opened this packet at all. One more thing very specific to my street, the system is being talked about specifically for the area around Flathead High School, which I live right there. That means if this goes forward, I am not a hypothetical example in someone else's speech. I am the person whose plates get logged. I have to deal with it daily. I don't like that. It's constitutionally unfair, right? Along with every other parent or every parent dropping off a child, every teacher who's going home, and every kid who's old enough to drive to school, nobody has told me what problem near that school actually requires a camera instead of a person watching the street. If there is a specific answer to that, I'd like to hear it and need to hear it before the 17th and not after. I will close with this. None of us up here tonight are against the parking enforcement. We are against writing the rules after the fact instead of before it. That is not a radical ask. It is the same standard you would want applied to any decision that affected you personally, right? Anybody. We're just asking you to apply it here too, before the 17th and not after. And before I leave this podium, I would like to express two more things with the time I've been given. John has been at this since July. I know some of you have found his tone frustrating at times. Trust me, he's my best friend. I get it too. I find it frustrating as well sometimes. I get it. I would ask you to separate that from the substance, okay? Nothing in his packet has been shown to be factually wrong, and I think that that's the most important thing that we all look at. Personal feelings and Constitution are two separate things. Thank you for your time. Have a good night, guys.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Any other public comment?
Good evening, Council. All right. My name is Robert Lee, and I'm here because I believe protecting children should be one of our highest priorities as a community. Also, the privacy and safety of our citizens through your ALPR systems. I want to be very clear about my position. This isn't about vigilant justice or taking the laws into our own hands. It's about making sure the laws we already have are enforced, that convicted offenders are properly supervised, and that we do everything legal possible to prevent children from becoming victims. Also, mishandling of personal data and information through a system of collectible data. When someone is convicted of a serious sexual offense against a child, the community has a responsibility to take the threat seriously. We need accountability, meaningful supervision, enforcement of court orders, and consequences when those orders are violated. I am asking this council to look at what Kalispell can do with its authority to strengthen child protection and enforcement, and to work with Flathead County and our state legislators on the issues that require state action, prevent the ALPR technology from becoming criminalized and invasion of privacies. Strengthen MCA 4618255 to establish a clear statewide minimum distance restriction qualified convicted child sex offenders from residing or working near schools, daycares, playgrounds, parks, and other locations where children regularly gather. Strong restrictions should apply to high-risk and repeat offenders. Currently, it's 300 feet. That's not even being enforced. There are people who are literally across the street who can see the Flathead High School from their living room windows, or an elementary school from their living room windows. I suggest maybe 1,000 feet. If tobacco, alcohol, THC has to be within 1,000 feet of a school, don't you think sex offenders should be too? Strengthen penalties for violating court order restrictions. Violating of residency, employment, non-contact, probation, parole, and other child safety restrictions should result in meaningful and escalating consequences, particularly for repeated violators. Enough with the catch and release. Strengthen enforcement for MCA 4623505 regarding sex offender registration. Intentional failure to report required changes should be investigated promptly with strict consequences for repeat or deliberate violations. Stop depleting the SVOR site and bring back pictures and employment. There is substantial evidence on SVOR websites of level 3 violators. Now, these are the most hardened violators we have in our county, and the minimum sentence is 25 years to 100 years life. And these people are out in 2 years, 3 years, and their rap sheet's getting longer and longer and longer. Some of these violators I am mentioning tonight have 8, 9, 10 of the same violations, and this one particular lives across the street from Glacier High School. 15, 16-year-olds, 8 accounts. What's across the street at Glacier High School? 15, 16-year-olds. Increase supervise of high-risk and repeat offenders, including more frequent compliance checks, closely monitoring. When I open up the SVR site, I get a picture, an employment address, their physical address, their license plate, what color their car is. So why can't I get a little blip of an ACO monitor of where this guy is? You know, is he at the grocery store? Is he hanging around the schools at 2 a.m.? I don't know. You know, we have their addresses. It's not like we're going to be vigilant. We just want to know where they are. Especially the transients. You know, the ones that are registered 12 downtown. Under 12 violators. And they don't have an address. They're just wandering the streets. Strengthen enforced or existing sentence. A sentence, probation condition, parole condition, or court order restrictions should not be treated as optional. Violation should receive timely investigation and judicial action. The mishandling of ALPR systems data could lead to invasion of privacy or expose people's personal addresses and phone numbers. That data is collected and can establish a pattern and trail leading hackers and violators to their front door just by simply parking downtown or a student at Flathead High School. Knowing where they eat, shop, work, and what time of day they are away from their children, spouses, and parents. Jim just checked in at the Lowe's by flock camera. Sally just checked in at Walmart via flock camera. So that knows that whoever's monitoring, cyber attacking the APLR system knows that little Sally and Johnny are home alone. I would also like to ask the council to support efforts to identify gaps in our current system, whether these involve a vendor supervision, communication between agencies, reporting enforcement, or resources for law enforcement. Therefore, when strong laws are needed at the state level, I am asking our local leaders to help bring those concerns to Helena. My goal is simple: protect children, enforce laws, hold convicted offenders accountable, and close the gaps that allow preventable harm to happen. I don't expect one city council meeting to solve this problem, but I do believe change starts when citizens are willing to stand up, bring special proposals forward, and ask their elected officials to act. I am willing to do that work, and I am asking you to work with me. Our children deserve nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Do we have any other public comment? And do we have any public comment online? With that, I'll move to a city manager report.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I will outline, I'm pretty sure that the fine increase for parkings would apply to the West Side Parking Management Zone as well, but I will verify that and get back to council. Because I just wanted to make sure there wasn't a specific fee tied to the district through the approval process, but in general, I do think that fine would apply over there as well, but I'll follow up. And as, mentioned through public comment, do have the budget coming up next week. That'll be a number of resolutions before you for consideration, and it is Fair Week. If you are there, swing by. We will have city staff at one of the booths, and that's all I got.
Okay. With that, I'll move to council reports. Mr. Dowd?
Cool. We need to create the policy here and publish it at the city. Number 3 is, with that policy being the guide rails, that's when we will start looking for vendors. And they will have to meet our policy to be considered. So if the police chief did say that we are going to purchase them and then write the policy, we can't really purchase the system or even test the system until we have the policy, because we don't know what guardrails have to be put in place to protect our privacy and the data and where it's stored until we have that council policy in place first. And there might be a lot of vendors, like I don't think Flock is a good example. I don't think Flock goes directly to a government system. I think it goes to Flock first, and then it goes to a government system, right? In any case, the data sharing piece of this is key for me. There's my intent, and I don't know what the rest of the council intent is to follow the Montana guidelines and state law for this, which is the parking system, the license plate is the parking system. The license plate reader for the parking system can only be used for parking. The traffic enforcement people can't even access that data. That's how I would write the policy, and I won't support it unless it actually says that. So just to outline the process one more time, it's got to be in the budget first before we can even look at anything and waste time on it. We have to have a policy second. Then we look for vendors. And then we will go through a testing period. And then all of the data from the testing period needs to be completely wiped, non-retrievable. And then if it goes into if we actually start using the system, at that point, that's when the overwatch for that system goes into place. And that's something else we have to consider as a council, because state law isn't really specific on how the oversight for these kind of systems go. So we have to be creative and privacy minded when we set that up as well. So there's a lot of things to consider, but I just wanted to make it clear to the public that we will not be purchasing a system and then writing the policy that matches the system. We will be writing our policy and looking for a vendor that can meet the policy guidelines. So that's I just wanted to be clear on that, so there wasn't any misunderstanding on how it goes. And I am happy to talk about this at any time, but we can't have a quorum when we're talking about this. We have to do this talking like we're doing now up in front of the public. So we can't have a decision-making quorum that discusses this outside of the public view. So that's one of the reasons that we've tried to have these little meetings that don't have quorum, so we can talk about this at length. And if you guys are interested in that, I'd be happy to facilitate as well. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Dowd. Mr. Fisher?
No, sir.
Mr. Lethbridge?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I just want to reiterate what Mr. Dowd was just saying. Let's use your lease example. Hear you guys talking. That is your concern, and it's my concern as well, and I hear that from Mr. Dowd as well. So what we're talking about here is putting the money aside, because we know that we want to see whether or not this technology is better than shocking tires. But before we actually spend that money, we're going to be very clear that the systematic retention of that data is not, one, available to a third-party vendor in a way that has the potential to be hacked, right? And two, is not being used for the kind of worst-case flock-type scenarios that we all see all over the internet. So before we spend that money, we're going to be very clear about what this does, its intention, and how it's going to be utilized.
Mr. Walker?
Ditto. I'll add, I know that we'll have more discussions about this when it comes up, when we start talking about vendors or when we start looking at the policies in general, and so we can get into the nitty gritty and that stuff. But I am confident that what we're talking about is technologically.
Back in to listen to our response, because we're not able to, again, have dialogue in public comment, but I think a lot of us are talking about an issue that is coming up in the budget next week. And I think, Mr. Dowd, I think you pretty well explained what the process is. We end up having to adopt the budget. I think the one thing that's the most important for me to clarify, we're talking about license plate readers that would be put onto 2 patrol cars, not all patrol cars. And then another thing, which is I think really important when we come down to the conversations that I keep hearing, is the difference between a static license plate reader, one that's put on a post in one spot. That's not up for proposal or something that we're considering for the budget. And I'm pretty sure that the majority of this council would dig their heels in pretty deep on that issue if that was true. And that is true, again, around our parks and then other spaces like that. I do know that this is out there in the public comment, and I appreciate you bringing it to the council and coming in public comment, because it's not easy to come and make the time to do this, and I appreciate that you're taking that effort to engage us civically in that way. But I do think that the one thing that I just wanted to make sure that we're clarifying is that we're not talking about a static reading system or a camera that would be placed in different places around parking. And I think that's a little bit, to me, there's a difference between what that would look like on 2 patrol cars. I think we're also talking about the data retention and what we would like to do as a policy. So that's sort of where we are with the public conversation. We had a good, robust conversation about a couple of items today. But most importantly, I just want to remind everybody that last week I did proclaim that this is Northwest Montana Rodeo and Fair Week. The fair is open, and so I think it's great if people remember that not only it isn't where you have to watch having quorum, it isn't where you have to watch having quorums or having sidebar conversations that aren't happening in the council. This is where we get to deliberate, and again, I see this is where we actually exist. We exist as a council together to making decisions, not just as individuals. That's to make sure that we're not having private dealings, but also to make sure that we are engaging. But gentlemen, I really appreciate that you're making the effort to come here and to do public comment, because it's not that easy. We see a lot of people who get intimidated just by the dais. That's why we make sure that there's options to be able to come into Zoom. And then we also have emails coming in. So do know that, appreciate your participation in this process. I know that the process seems really clunky. So thank you for coming back in to be able to hear when we can have a little bit of dialogue about the issue. And then a reminder that next week, especially for new council members, we will go through the passing of the budget, and it is a longer hearing, and we go by funds, and it is a very technical hearing as we go through things. Items like this, we might be able to have a conversation, but there's also a lot that we go through in just how the budget is presented. So if council has questions about that, I encourage you to meet with the city manager to make sure that you understand what the process is, because it looks a little bit different than how our budget conversations have been before, just because we end up passing all the specific budgets in different resolutions. That will be a public hearing that we have next week. It'll be a long one. And with that, I will adjourn our workshop.